Online, I've heard two very different reviews of Five Nights at Freddy's. And I think that's caused by two different issues. One issue is I think the trailers were very deceptive and don't give you a good indication of the type of movie that it is. The other thing is that Five Nights at Freddy's has a dedicated fan base that have played the video games and are kind of already fanning out for the movie, kind of regardless of they're not looking at all the detail of how good or it is or isn't as a movie. They're just hoping it's faithful to the IP they already know and kind of delivers to them the visuals and the story that they're used to. And the thing is, I think the movie does that. However, I think there are issues with the actual filmmaking as well as the trailer, which I think is does not give you an accurate portrayal of the type of movie you're going to be watching. So in this video, what I'm going to do is my usual review, but I'm going to specifically address these issues because I think this movie has caused there to be a very polarized viewpoints because of the different lenses people may be looking at the movie through. Now, before I go too much into an actual viewing or review of a movie, I like to talk a little bit about the creators of the movie. Now, in this case, the creators seem to be fairly novice. I mean, everybody who gets to the point of making a feature film has some work, and these the people involved here certainly do. But looking at the information I was able to gather about them, they've been generally either coming from very niche backgrounds or just not a whole lot of experience in feature filmmaking. So the director is a woman named Emma Tammy, and I couldn't find a Wikipedia entry on her. I did Google her and found that she, I guess, maybe done some short films. It's not clear she done under any other major motion pictures, but she done a few short. She definitely done some work before getting to this level. But couldn't really tell very easily exactly the nature of that work. The movie was actually written by three different people. One of the three credited screenwriters was the creator of, or the, I guess, attributed creator of Five Nights at Freddy's. Although as a video game, I'm sure there were a lot of people involved in the creation of the game. But the quote unquote creator of Five Nights at Freddy's is Scott Cawthon. Perhaps he was the writer of the game, like he's the author of the story that the game is based on. Maybe that's his origin there. But the point is, he's one of the three screenwriters. He's the only one that, again, had a Wikipedia page. And his background is actually both in making video games as well as screenwriting for Christian-based storytelling. So it looked like animation, short videos, things that are specifically for a Christian audience versus a wide, what's that word I'm looking for? A pluralistic audience, or varied in faith and ethnicity and all that good stuff. So that's the background for these creators, and having seen that, it helps explain some of the filmmaking issues that I saw when I watched the movie. At this point, I should probably tell you my background with Five Nights at Freddy's. I've heard of the video game. I've seen like the stills like on the Xbox store or Steam or what have you, but I never played any of them. They look like kind of like scary video games, like stuff will pop out at you. Got like a Chuck E. Cheese theme going there. Your Chuck E. Cheese animatronics are going wild, and you're trying to navigate through an environment that has them in there, and they're trying to get you. So I have not experienced playing any of the Five Nights at Freddy's video games. Apparently, there've been like 4 or 5 of them, plus a couple spinoffs. So it's a big franchise at this point. But I haven't been involved in it. So I came into the movie based solely on the trailer, and the movie's trailer indicates that it's a horror movie, that it's a kind of almost like a slasher, but the slasher is these animatronic toys that they're hunting people down and that they're the big bad of the movie. And so that's what I kind of went into the movie with. And the movie starts out, the beginning of the movie, it starts out with that kind of approach where you have a situation of somebody being chased by the animatronic creatures. That's how the movie opens. So again, it continues to kind of lead you towards this. But once it does that, you very quickly feel like you didn't necessarily get the kind of movie that you were hoping for. For one, the cinematography isn't particularly good. I watched it at night in the dark with no other light sources, and I could still barely see what was happening on the screen. That's just bad filmmaking. And it was irritating because I'm like, I can't make it any darker in here. My eyes have adjusted, and I can still barely see the character, the one human being on the screen, their face. And I understand the idea of mood lighting and all that good stuff, but it was to the extreme of I'm almost like I'm looking at a black screen. It wasn't. I mean, you could see something on the screen, but it was very minimalist. And it's hard to be but so fearful of what's going on and being creeped out when you can't even see anything and there's only a hint at what's going on. And then when they finally get to the initial first kill, it kind of cuts away from it, which I thought was kind of odd. So I'm like, when you watch slasher horror movies, the kills are a big part of them. In this movie, the first opportunity to kind of have to do that, there's a hint at kind of what happens, but it's not, it's very underwhelming. And of all the things it kind of teases at, it's like some kind of, it just, it shows what's about to happen to him, but there's no blood. There's no, I'm not even sure if the person, I guess maybe you hear a scream, but I'm not even sure if there's a scream you hear. And it just kind of cuts away like, guess he's dead. And you'll find out for a while later what the fate of that particular individual was. So that's kind of how you get introduced to the movie. And so you get this certain impression of what kind of movie it is. And the problem is that's not the kind of movie it is. It is not a slasher movie. It's not even really a horror movie. It's a what I call a supernatural drama. The Sixth Sense was a great example of a supernatural drama and kind of suffered a little bit of the same issue. It had some jumps, kind of scares in it a little bit, but it was mostly about a little boy and kind of motion and also Bruce Willis's character and some of the issues that they were having to deal with through the lens of a situation that had supernatural elements to it. In the same way, Five Nights at Freddy's is obviously a supernatural concept. And I don't want to say too much about it because part of the mystery of the story, which if you haven't played the video games, you wouldn't necessarily know the mystery, know what's happening. And it plays with that. So it intends for you to kind of not know it going in, even though all the fans, people I think are liking it more, already know that. But I won't say too much about it. But obviously, there's a supernatural aspect to it. I mean, they're animatronic toys that are trying to murder people. So obviously, there's something supernatural going on. And there is. But really, the movie's about brother played by Josh Hutcherson, who, let me just say now, is an excellent performance. His acting in this movie carries it. I'm not saying he's perfect, but the weight that he gives his role, the seriousness with which he takes it, really holds the movie afloat when most of the acting and what's going on around him is not nearly as good as what he's bringing. The main story is this older brother and his little sister, the issues that he's dealing with, and then also his relationship with trying to kind of raise his little sister. That's what the movie's about. And of course, there's this aspect of Five Nights at Freddy's and stuff that goes on there. And obviously, he's at some point going to intersect with those characters and it's going to affect his life. But it's really a drama. And I mean, all movies have drama of some sort, but horror and slasher movies aren't generally centered around the drama between siblings and kind of getting over your own issues. Like that's more of just a straight drama with supernatural elements. I mean, it's all a gray area. The point is I'm trying to make is if you come in here expecting a serious horror movie, a slasher movie, it's not going to be what you get. And I can see why there are a lot of people who are extremely dejected coming out of this movie because it does not deliver what the trailer suggests it is, nor what the beginning of the first act suggests it is. In fact, once you get past the very early parts of the movie, it slips into a kind of a dramatic rhythm of going to the place. It's Five Nights at Freddy's, and there are 5 nights of the main character, Josh Hutcherson. The story takes place over 5 nights of him going to this place to act as the security guard, and it gets into this rhythm, but it's a dramatic rhythm. There's really not. There's one intermediate sequence that's kind of like a slasher movie, but again, if that's what you're waiting for, you're going to be underwhelmed by it. And that's the core issue with this movie in terms of those that won't like it is they're coming in expecting a horror slasher type movie. And what it delivers emotionally, but it doesn't deliver on those type of thrills and chills that one might expect from this type of movie. I mean, I could see someone taking this concept and making a much different movie, one that might have made the people who played the game very unhappy, but the people who saw the trailer more happy. But that's not what you get. Speaking of that mystery about the nature of the robotic animatronic characters that are, killing people and doing generally bad stuff, that mystery isn't all that mysterious. I think I got spoiled by some type of media, so I knew what it was. So I can't speak to how hard it really was for me to have figured it out because I was pretty sure the moment they had a hint about what it was, I knew what it was because there's something. I don't know if my daughter said something to me about it or if I saw something in the media, but I think I had some inkling of what it was because once there was any little suggestion about what it was in the movie, I knew that's what it was. And in general, the movie, for someone that doesn't know much of anything about the IP, still seems fairly obvious. It's not really getting over on any kind of viewer that's paying attention to the movie that's being delivered to them. It's also not short. For you're used to super horror thrillers. Usually, you're dipping in an hour and 30 to 2 hours. This one's a lot closer to 2 hours, and it doesn't have those thrills and chills that you might hope a movie like this would have. So it can be a hard watch for someone that's really not looking for supernatural drama, having to try to sit through it. I can see people watching the first 50 minutes to an hour and then just leaving because they're just, this is not the movie that they came to see. Um, I did stop. I watched, I want to say about half of it. And then I think I was watching it late in the evening and I was getting tired. And so I watched, I think, the first half of it, then came back and watched the other half. But I was tempted to not, to just, I could have not watched the rest of it. Like if I was watching on Peacock and if Peacock had somehow gotten canceled the next day, and I don't know that I would have made any effort to watch the rest of it. I could have just left it be. That's kind of how I felt after watching half of it. Now, I'll say this though, talking about act structure, the third act is actually fairly solid. And if you stick it out, if you go into this movie and you're watching it, if you're connecting with Josh Hutcherson's character and the things he's going, which I did. I'm a father, and so even though he's an older brother to a younger sister, I related to it some. So I connected with what the story they were trying to tell through his character. And so when I was watching it, once I got to the third act, once the movie played itself out, I thought the ending was actually fairly satisfactory. I came out of the movie thinking, okay, it's not a movie I regret having watched. So you know how I have my grades 1 through 3 are basically regret watching, except for ones which can be so bad they're funny. 4 through 6, the middle, and then 7 through 10 are recommendables. This one, it's not. I did not regret watching after I was finished. It was kind of unique, interesting concept. I thought the story was solid. There was some plot stuff that isn't great. If you sat through it, I think that the third act is solid. Actually, does give you some suspense, some thrills in the third act. So it's not devoid of any suspense or thrills. I didn't mean to give that impression. It does have some stuff, but it's all in the third act. So that's how suspense movies and kind of general suspense thrillers are. They save most of it for the third act. Horror and slasher type movies don't do that. They have it all throughout. So I was expecting coming into it. But what I got was a more of a regular style movie where it's all essentially set up for the third act. And the third act is where whatever payoffs you get are all in the third act. But honestly, the payoffs aren't that great. They're okay, but it doesn't really make like, wow, the third act saved the movie. It didn't save the movie. And I'm kind of teasing it a little bit, but let me just go ahead and say now. My rating for it is a 4 out of 10. It did make it above that threshold of regretting watching it. I didn't regret watching it. It had some interesting stuff it had going on, some uniqueness to it. It is an interesting IP, and the core story is solid. But there's enough boredom and enough disinterest that I also had that I can't really put it any higher than that. But I can certainly understand those that knew what to expect liking a whole lot more than I did because it seemed like it was fairly faithful to the source material. Some of the visuals were actually pretty good. It's like early on, the cinematography was a problem, and I think they were trying to just make a lot of the stuff that wasn't really that interesting scary because it was dark, but there wasn't actually a lot going on, and so a lot of scenes are just very dark because they're trying to emphasize the darkness, and it almost kind of felt like why doesn't this guy turn some more lights on? It just seemed like who wants to be in some creepy place working in the dark. I thought, why not just turn some more lights on so it's just brighter in there? It just seems like it's dark and unnecessarily so at times for this guy who's a security guard there. So you have some cinematography issues, but later on, once there's been the reveal, you see the animatronic puppets and all their glory. Once all that's shown, then the lighting isn't really a problem. It's like almost like there was something they were going for early on that didn't work for me. It may work for some. But then later on, there are some good visuals. There is stuff like that that makes it work. So I think that's my review of Five Nights at Freddy's. I think it's an interesting supernatural drama, but not a lot of thrills or suspense. Solid third act, but you gotta wade through a lot to get to it. Anyway, thanks for watching my review of Five Nights at Freddy's. If you got this far, consider liking, maybe subscribing, and stay tuned for more reviews and trailer reactions from Low Key Classic Movies. Have a nice night.